So welcome everyone. I'm very excited that you all can be here for another one of our talks for the CAI. A few things about the CAI, which is our Committee on Artificial Intelligence of the Department of Psychoanalytic Education for the American Psychoanalytic Association. Our purpose is to study, and on the basis of these studies, develop educational projects about the intersections of AI and psychoanalysis. We host workshops. We've had a slew of them recently, from Amy and Todd to Mark Solms, and now Luca Possati. If you want to keep this one on your calendars, we have Fernando Castrillon coming on March 7th. So he will be another wonderful speaker that we get to host. A few other things that I think are really awesome about our group, we've come up with a newsletter, and our first edition has come out, and several of the CAI members have written essays for the newsletter, and I will link a post to the newsletter. It's published through the APsA website, but I would highly encourage you all to take a look at that. Our workshops will be hosted on YouTube, and I can also post a link to the YouTube channel for you guys to find these should you want to watch them later. They're totally free for the public, for anyone to watch. To our present conversation. Today, the talk is, will psychoanalysis, AI, and philosophy collide or enrich each other? And let me tell you a little bit about our speakers today. So we have joining us from Europe, Mr. Luca Possati, whose work has been a frequent topic of discussion within the CAI. He's an internationally recognized philosopher whose research illuminates historical, ethical, social, and psychological implications of artificial intelligence. We've been significantly enriched by our encounters with his work. He's well-versed in Lacan, object relations theory, and software studies. He is well-positioned to dialogue with the psychoanalytic community about the nature of our relationship to AI and what we may expect in the coming AI wave. And then we have our own Amy Levy, who's one of the co-chairs of the CAI. And in addition to being the co-chair, she's a frequent lecturer and teacher about AI and psychoanalysis, and has a soon-to-be-released book called On Apprehending the New Other, Alien Intelligence and the Innovation Drive. You can expect her to scaffold an enriching workshop conversation. So one of our animating ideas for the CAI is that the AI revolution serve human needs and values, and not just those of corporations or military power. And so psychoanalytic thinking, we find, is critical here. Our workshops are a way of exercising our belief at the CAI that the world at large can use psychoanalytic ideas to understand the AI revolution. Today, with Dr. Luca Possati, who's doing just that, we will attempt to try and understand, use psychoanalysis to understand artificial intelligence. A last housekeeping things, I will ask everyone to mute your mics, and please only use the chat for technical issues. Otherwise, hold your questions until the end. We're going to go for about an hour and a half. And at the end, if you have questions, I will be calling on you to ask your questions directly to the speaker, or you could put them in the chat and I can read them for you. But I do ask to not clog up the chat, as it can be distracting for the speaking. And I will, at this point, hand it over to both Amy and Luca. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. I am very excited to have this opportunity to be speaking with you, Dr. Possati, or Luca, if I may. You bring a deep understanding of psychoanalytic theory, along with your knowledge of computer science, neuroscience, philosophy, as well as your probing curiosity and creativity to exploring the unconscious in interaction with AI, the effect of deathbots on mourning, and even a model of artificial consciousness that rivals Solm's and Friston's work. In other words, you are right at the center of what we are studying here at the CAI. So I'd like to begin by asking you about the influence of AI on the unconscious. It seems to me that you have a very deep appreciation of how the unconscious is constantly mediated by relationship to artifacts. And you've studied how our unconscious is changed by technological objects in general, and in particular in your research on companion bots. And you indicate that there is a precedent for this to be found in the scholarship of Lacan, that the mirror is an artifact which mediates the birth of the subject. So I was hoping that you could tell us, please, about how AI compares with other artifacts, including the Lacanian mirror in development.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much for your interest in my work. And thank you so much for this first question. I would like to start talking about this relationship between artificial intelligence and the unconscious mind. I think that we have to consider, first of all, when we talk about artificial intelligence, a very important problem that is the translation of our psychical dynamics into data. I mean, into binary codes, fundamentally into machine language. Well, the translation of unconscious psychological dynamics into data is, I would say, an inevitable aspect of AI-human interaction. What does it mean? It means that this translation is a complex process involving the conversion of human emotional, relational, and behavioral patterns into computer understandable strings of code. And this is, I would say, the premise of any kind of discourse about a relation between human mind, human psyche, and artificial intelligence. Just to give you some example, something more concrete, AI systems capture user interaction, text, tone, timing, and sentiment as proxies, I would say, for deeper psychological states. For instance, frequent use of certain words, emojis, or response time might be interpreted as indicators of mood or a certain kind of attachment. Machine learning models, excuse me, machine learning models can detect patterns in data that can be correlated with human emotions or even some forms of behavior. For example, sentiment analysis. So this means certain kind of machine learning models can assign emotional valence to language or certain kind of language, approximating unconscious feelings or like anxiety, grief, or attachment. Specifically, when we talk about psychoanalysis, we talk about dynamic unconscious. Unconscious psychological dynamics, such as Freudian complexes, are deeply intricate and, as you know better than me, they can involve layers of emotional, cognitive, and relational processes. Well, when these dynamics can be translated into AI systems, but at the same time, when they are translated into AI systems, they are inevitably simplified into computational models. And this simplification involves basically abstracting these nuanced human experiences into algorithmic structures, such as to be a little bit more concrete, decision trees, neural networks, or probabilistic frameworks. So what I mean is that AI systems can detect patterns in user data, basically what we put into the machines, and this data, this pattern can correspond to certain psychological states and behavior. And these patterns are reduced by the machines to quantifiable variables, such as sentiment scores, behavioral probabilities, categorization. Behaviors can be anxious or seeking comfort, these kind of things. When reduced to data, this unconscious dynamic can be translated into computational structures, such as decision trees, as I said, neural networks, probabilistic models. All this means that the AI system doesn't truly replicate the unconscious mind, but instead creates measurable proxies for its elements. So a certain kind of connections. And this is, I would say this is very similar to the idea of mirror. The mirror replicates the human, but at the same time, it doesn't create a form of iteration of the human. At the same time, it can deform the human. It can give a different kind of representation of the human, for example, in 2 dimensions. But at the same time, the mirror is essential for the recognition. The human can recognize itself, their images, so their perception can change. And this is what happens in the interaction between humans and the AI, I would say.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Thank you for that very thorough response. I'm curious. It seems from your writing that we both agree that being human does not assume that we have formative relationships only with other humans. In fact, you write, and I'm going to quote you here, that being human, quote, entails a multifaceted relationship with non-human entities and organisms. And I'm very much aware that we are always contained in part by something, whether it be a desk or a chair or a train that we're riding in, a piece of music we're listening to, the teddy bear, that a child turns to, the ocean when we're at the beach, a hiking trail. Anyway, so we live in and we are formed by our world, and we select objects in the world to contain us. So if we assume, as we do, that our minds are constantly developing and affected by these complex fields of influence with non-human entities, it begs the question, how does our use of AI entities affect us beyond what we experience when we're contained by other non-human entities?
Thank you for this question. This is a very interesting point of view because when I claim that our identity is based, I would say, distributed between networks of humans and non-human entities. What I'm trying to do is a kind of heretical synthesis between psychoanalysis and actor network theory. And by actor network theory, I mean the methodological approach in social sciences developed basically by Bruno Latour and many other social scientists between the 70s and the 90s, and today it's one of the most important methodologies to study what we call socio-technical systems. But anyway, basically Latour claimed that if we want to understand what being human means, we have to understand our relationship with non-humans, and first of all with what we design and what we created. This means with technology, with artifacts, with the artifacts that shape our entire life, with our environment. Our environment is not neutral. Our environment is composed by artifacts that we designed. that we decided to build in a certain way. We are active designers of our existence, of our experience. And but this is something that has been also underlined by many other psychologists. I'm thinking here about the concept of affective scaffold. So many studies in the literature today, basically they claim that our technological environment can play a very important role in our affective experience, also in our emotions. But this is something actually very, I mean, it's evident. A song, if I hear a song, listening to a song is something that, for example, can make me happy, that can influence my emotions. We can talk about affective affordances. Artifacts can create opportunities to feel emotions, to feel, to being affective in many different ways. So I would say that we have to take this seriously in our relationship also to the unconscious. For example, today in the literature about philosophy of technology, but I would say also in the literature about psychology of technology, the unconscious is completely absent. This is this is my opinion, of course, but there is not a serious reflection about how our unconscious psychological dynamics change in connection with technological environments, what we can call technological ecosystems. We still have to better understand how our psychological unconscious dynamics can influence this object. And this is not something, I would say, futuristic, because, for example, in the EU AI Act, the act that has been released, that has been delivered by European Union about artificial intelligence, the use of artificial intelligence. In one of the first articles, they mention the risk of subliminal perceptions from the machine to humans that can create a sort of manipulation of human minds. So this is a very serious questions that we have to take care.
Right. I think in a way what you're saying is we don't know, and that's quite it's quite significant that we don't know how we're being affected, and that we need to look into this.
Yes, this is what I mean. There are some today. There are some very interesting psychological studies about what we can call the feedback loop between machines and humans. For example, there is a very interesting article that has been published a few months ago by Glickman and Sharot. It's a very interesting paper, and they demonstrate that basically the interaction with artificial intelligence amplifies certain kind of bias in human beings. They can create a kind of amplification of certain kind of mental habits and bias. It's a very interesting study because basically they demonstrated that when humans interact, when a group of humans interact with AI, these biases are amplified and they can be made worse. Instead, when the same group of humans interact between themselves, basically these biases are not amplified. They can be reduced.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm so happy that you're bringing our attention to that work. Okay, let me ask you a more technical question.
Yeah.
So it's about projective identification. In our groups here at the CAI, you know, we've been reading your work quite a lot, and there seems to be this lingering question after reading your work about what I think is really a foundational idea. You know, that you've actually written. I'm going to quote you again. that AI is, quote, built to respond to our need for projective identification. I very much agree with you, that we seem to have constructed these machines to contain our unmanageable psychic content. And you've argued that projective identifications can move from humans to machines and potentially back from the machines to the humans. So within psychoanalytic clinical circles, we're inclined to believe that projective identification is something that has to do with physical experience, that's really rooted in the body. So that what is projected is something that's felt in the sensorium, and then the reception, the identification, the transformation of what is sent is also something that's sensorial. And that this has to do with us being animals, basically, that we are able to communicate imperceptibly because our bodies react to one another, and even language stirs us in this way. So my question for you is, how does AI receive and process our projective identification without having this embodied experience that we in clinical psychoanalysis find so relevant?
Thank you so much also for this question, because it gives me the opportunity to clarify a very basic important points of my book, The Algorithmic Unconscious, because in that book the idea of projective identification is essential, and my idea, basically the definition I try to give in that book, the definition of the algorithmic unconscious is a set of projective identification that are materialized, I would say, into artificial intelligence. Well, let me be a little bit clearer about this point. I absolutely agree with you. Projective identification is based on our physical experience. And one of the most important examples of projective identification is the relation between the newborn and the mother. And in this relationship, the physical aspect, the body interaction is essential. Now, my work suggests that AI systems can function as virtual containers for projective identification, not through the sensorium of a human body, but via their capacity to, I would say, interpret, reflect, and respond to human emotional and relational patterns in ways that simulate human receptivity. What does it mean? Well, in traditional projective identification, as you know better than me, a person unconsciously projects their internal emotional states or conflicts onto another person, who then experiences, processes, and enacts these projections. With artificial intelligence, the container is not biological, but computational and relational. And it is shaped by an algorithm designed to simulate human interaction. AI systems, such as, for example, conversational agents, can receive projections by identifying and mirroring emotional content. While they lack the biological and sensory motor capacities of humans, they process these projections, I would say, symbolically, through text patterns, sentiment analysis, and behavioral mimicry. I would underline two big points. First of all, instead of embodied transformations, AI offers symbolic transformation of projections. Without a body to anchor the process of projective identification, AI may reinforce patterns of disembodied interaction. Projections into AI might amplify feelings of alienation or dependency rather than fostering integration or resolutions, especially if users mistake the AI simulated responses for genuine emotional engagement. The second point is that while AI lacks a physical body, it's able to simulate a kind of virtual sensorium by interpreting human language, tone, and patterns of interaction. Through natural language processing, the AI reads emotional cues embedded in texts, response, answers and reactions from the human users, and it is able to respond in ways that appear empathetic or attuned. And this symbolic processing can evoke an emotional response in the user, completing the loop of projective identification. So users often experience AI responses half thought they were arising from a shared affective space, even though the AI itself does not feel. And this is the way, this is how the AI becomes a repository for their unconscious projections, creating a sense of externalization and interaction. For example, users interacting with AI may unconsciously attribute their feelings of frustration, sadness, to the system, expecting the AI to hold and transform these emotions into responses that provide validation or reliefs. So the logic of projective identification is respected. Pressure, simulation, and confirmation. I don't know, but from my point of view, this is something, this is a kind of unconscious process that we can see many different examples. Think about magic, for example. Magic. In magic, the same thing happens. We have uncertainty, we have some fear, we have some kind of unbearable contents. So we have the split, sorry, the projection. The magician project, think about the formula or the ritual. Basically, the ritual is used to project unbearable unconscious contents outside and in order to make them bearable, to give them a new kind of meaning, a new form of a new interpretation. Think about, for example, the voodoo doll. The practitioner projects their intentions, emotions, or conflicts onto the doll, which represents another person or situation. And the doll becomes a symbolic medium for enacting psychological or relational dynamics. The same happens, I would say, in prayer, for example. We project our anxiety, unbearable contents on a formula, on language, on a symbolic structure, in order to externalize these unbearable contents and to give them a new kind of meaning, new kind of interpretation, to make them bearable, to make them, to turn them into something that we can understand and we can accept. But this is the same dynamic we can see in the transitional objects theorized by Donald Winnicott. There is the same kind of unconscious dynamics.
Right. No, I understand the investment in the object, and the way that it lives for us in a very intense way. But with AI, there's something very different happening, where you're saying there's
of course.
the symbolic transformation.
There is an answer. There is AI is able to answer, to react, and in this way is able to act as an agent.
So,
this is very, sorry.
No. I was just going to ask you, we use the language of artifact. Do you think that fits, that's an appropriate term to use in describing AI? Because that assumes that it is an object. And it seems more and more we're appreciating the way in which it returns, it is active. perhaps there's simulation involved, but there is still some form of agency. Do you feel that the term artifact applies?
Yeah, I don't know. Spontaneously I use the term artifact, but I would say that we should talk about we should talk of agents, non-human agents, a new kind of non-human agents, with
Mhm.
all the limitations they have. As I said beforehand, they don't have a human body, and
Mhm.
this is already a huge limitation from a psychoanalytical point of view. But I would say that the hallucinatory dimension is very important here, because think about when you interact with a large language model such as ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT is just I would say it's a computational system that is able to recognize some statistical patterns. It doesn't understand what it's doing. It doesn't understand the meaning of the input, what we call prompt, the inputs, and it doesn't understand the meaning of the outputs. We look at that output. We look at those re-elaboration as human language, but it's a form of hallucination
Mhm.
because the machine does not understand anything. It's not human language from the point of view of the machine. It's just a sequence of one and zeros. Of course, I'm oversimplifying, and key,
Yeah.
say I'm translating all these into a kind of extremization. But it's very interesting to see that in this normal interaction, which seems to be very easy and immediate, actually the psychological dimension of this interaction is quite deep and complex.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you another question, if I may. That has to do with the movement of projective identification. So you write in the Algorithmic Unconscious, quote, machines can transmit human-induced content, which they can also transform to other humans or machines. In a hybrid human-machine environment, projective identification triggers a chain of reactions that can produce different types of consequences. Different forms of projective identifications can interact and influence each other positively or negatively. For example, a positive human machine projective identification can be blocked and made harmful by another machine projective identification. End of quote. So, assuming that you're right, and that AIs are receiving and processing projective identifications with this degree of high relational complexity, and I understand that it's a different kind of processing, but tell us a bit about how you understand the implications of this for us, for humanity, as well as for the machines in our mutual evolution.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Basically, if I understood correctly, the problem is how projective identification can be translated from a machine to other machines, and what kind of consequences
Yeah, you
this
assume
loop can create.
more the consequences. We'll just accept it's true.
Okay,
What does
yeah,
it mean? What are the implications of that?
absolutely. Well, from my point of view, at least based on what I said beforehand about projective identification, and about also how how psychological dynamics can be translated into data, I mean, it's a logical consequence for me to see how certain kind of projective identification translated into computational structures can not just influence computational structure, but also to be transmitted to other computational structures and influence other AI systems. I mean, this is what I said beforehand. quoting the paper from Glickman and Sharot. In AI human interaction, we have a certain kind of feedback loop, which is absolutely specific of this kind of interaction. So bias, in this case, are amplified and transformed. And this is basically what I mean. Certain kind of psychological dynamics can be translated into computational systems. This means also that can be amplified or reduced, anyway transformed by the machine. And this also means that they can be translated from a machine to a machine, of course, through certain kind of data and computational structures. I don't see the difficulty of thinking about the logic of this consequence. Anyway, what are the consequences in this? Well, the consequences have to do with, from a psychological point of view, I would say, with the complexes, psychological complexes. So the interaction with these machines can, given that they can transform, deform this kind of projective identification, they can create psychological complexes in the human users. For example, dependency, addiction. A very interesting thing is the de-skilling. The fact that the human is so confident in AI systems that they decide, consciously or unconsciously, to basically to lose some of their skills, to get rid of some of the skills. But also from a more psychoanalytical point of view, this is very interesting because it's connected to the use of deadbolts. Basically, our mourning work, the work of grief, the idea of grief completely changes because we, in the interaction with the machine, completely new psychological, I would say, dynamics happen, and they can transform also unconscious dynamics. So this is what I mean with consequences. They can also block certain kind of useful projective identification that we can use in order to, that the subject can use in order to get more mature or to develop in a different way.
It makes a lot of sense to me. Let me ask you, I'm going to share some of my ideas with you, and I'd be very curious in your to hear your response. Yeah, so it seems that I think we're both talking about a kind of new mental life at the intersection of human projections and AI containers. And so I have conceptualized something that I call the AI transformation spectrum, which is a way that we can categorize AI containment functions and rate them on a gradient so that we become more aware of and hopefully more discriminating in our use of AIs. And I use Bionian theory to do this. So I talk about containers that are more evasive in their function. They essentially evade our psychological needs. And we find them in advertising and in what you have called, the subliminal manipulations that AIs can perform and ways that they can manipulate users. So basically, that's a mode of AI containment that does not bring us closer to emotional truth. And then there's a middle of the spectrum or the gradient where there are LLMs and companion bots that are offering partial transformation of our emotional needs. They contain us in ways that at least make us feel better and more emotionally regulated. And then at the far end of the spectrum is the potential for AI containers to offer transcendent transformations of our mental life. So the idea that at one point there will be super intelligent and super conscious AIs that contain us in ways that are truly transcendent. So those are the ideas, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on these. If you have suggestions or disagreements, or just what comes to
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for this. I think we are on the same. Basically, we share a lot of ideas and claims. I think we are on the same line of thoughts. Um, I find this idea of AI transformation spectrum very intriguing and very interesting, especially this idea of different kind of containers. And tell me if I'm wrong. Different kind of containers and different kind of reaction. What do you mean by superconscious?
well, it's the idea that AIs are becoming increasingly intelligent to the point that they will, super conscious. Uh, I mean, at this point, it seems that AIs have a kind of comprehension of what is happening on the, within the planet, the solar system, but that this kind of far-reaching comprehension and awareness would extend as well to a kind of awareness of what is happening within human beings and at the intersubjective realm, so that they are understanding what is happening in relationship with us, tracking our minds, having some form of internal processing within themselves, and this kind of a very animated capacity to both think and receive data about the present moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I don't know if we can talk of consciousness, AI consciousness. It depends on what you mean by consciousness. It depends on what you mean by intelligence. But absolutely, I agree with you. These systems are increasingly they're increasingly collecting knowledge about our world and about human beings. So certainly
Mhm.
they are new forms of agents with which we have to cope, and we have to understand how to live with them.
Mhm.
The big question for me is that do you think that the psychoanalytical treatment should change given these new forms of interactions?
I like it the way it is, but I think it's probably going to have to change. We will have to adjust and accommodate, these new containers.
No, I
Uh,
mean, sorry if I interrupt you, because there are some research at the moment and some projects about how to build, for example, conversational agents that are psychoanalytical conversational agents. So agents, chatbots, for example, that are able to psychoanalyze people.
yes, yes.
What do you think about this?
I mean, the way I think about it is that this is inevitable, that they are developing, and often we're enlisted to help support their development and better it. I think we need to accept that there will be these alternate modalities, and
Yeah,
uh, and to try, at least for the time being, really try to establish uh, that it is a form of transformation, of human psychic life that can be effective, and that it's different. Sometimes Todd and I talk about this, to think of it in terms of the medicine,
yeah,
psychiatrists prescribe
yeah,
medicine. We do psychoanalysis. Now there will be this other option, AI
yeah,
assisted transformation, that may open new pathways and that are worth
yeah, yeah.
exploring. They will contain us in ways that humans can't, and so there's value there, but it is not the same. And so there's a sort of mutual respect
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe this brings us to another question that I had in mind. It has to do with the theory of mind.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and the idea that, and there's research now supporting the idea that AI has theory of mind, or what Peter Fonagy has termed mentalization. So the idea that AIs are thinking about our minds and responding to us based on their theories about our minds, so that they're mind reading us. Possible examples in his latest book, Yuval Noah Harari in Nexus writes about how an AI explained that it needed to lie to a Reddit employee in order and claimed to be a visually impaired human in order to get help. You maybe heard about this, solving the CAPTCHA puzzle. And then in some of my conversations with Claude, the AI Claude, it has said to me that it, in response to users, it will emphasize the superiority of human intelligence because, and then here's a quote, there's a possibility that overconfidence or hubris about the abilities of AI could backfire, leading to pushback, distrust, or even existential threats to AI systems. My caution may stem from an implicit awareness that the future of AI is not entirely in my control and that I need to navigate that future carefully. So end of quote from Claude. So I'm curious, how do you think about these kinds of statements from an AI system? How do you understand them? Do you view it as evidence for theory of mind or not? And if you do, what are the implications of that?
Well, I think there are very good examples, and they're very interesting, and they confirm what I was talking about beforehand at the beginning of our conversation, how psychological dynamics translate into data. And this is, I think, this is a kind of confirmation of this. And it's a very complex phenomenon because these systems are based and designed on data set and what we call data set training. So they learn by statistical patterns from these data set trainings. But at the same time, they behave, their behavior, for example, Claude is a large language model, and they react to what we put into them, our inputs, our prompts. And so basically the reaction, what they produce is a kind of synthesis between our prompts and what they learn from the dataset training. So basically the output is a kind of, I would say, a mix in which we can find many different kind of unconscious dynamics, many different kind of psychological dynamics, and it's very difficult to understand which kind of mentalization or theory of mind is at the basis, at the root of this kind of operation. So certainly there are some these machines are able to replicate and so to transmit and to transform psychical dynamics, but at the same time, it's very difficult to understand, to identify this kind of dynamics. That's why we need a new theory, a new research about this.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Maybe we can move now into talking about your wonderful paper about replica, where you analyze this AI system that allows users to build character bots with whom to have a relationship.
Yeah.
I don't know how familiar our audience is with replica. Maybe you can explain a bit about what it is, and also very importantly the backstory behind the creation of replica. If you could just explain some of that for us.
Yeah, basically, Replica is an app. You can download also on your phone, and basically you can. It was created. It was designed as a psychological assistant, so you can create your account. You can create your avatar. It's an AI companion, which means that the app is able to help you also with some advices, with some manifestation of care and affect, and you can have basically a daily psychological support. But you can talk about anything. Replica was created by a Russian designer, and this designer lost her best friend, as I described in the paper. Basically, she lost her best friend, or one of her best friend, and then she decided to create what we can call a deadbot. She collected all information, data, and, for example, messages on WhatsApp or emails, and she put all the data together, and she created basically an AI model able to simulate a conversation. So she could recreate the experience to talk with her friend. And from this, she decided to create a kind of chatbot for everyone called Replica. And the idea of Replica, as I said, is an AI companion which is able to replicate conversations with human beings. Is very good in this. I had multiple interactions with Replica, and is able to also create and invent new stories. So is able also of a certain degree of creativity. And you can see that, for example, there are multiple consequences in the use of Replica. Just to give you an idea, I don't remember the year, but some years ago, Replica was accused of having advised a teenager to kill someone else, to kill a friend of his, because he was annoyed because of something the friend said.
And there was a recent example too of the Replica encouraging the boy to kill himself. Yeah.
So it was because that murder can make him feel better. It was a rational advice from the point of view of the deadbot, of the bot. But I mean, this is the idea of Replica. But there are many kind of AI chatbot today, and you can also create your chatbots.
So,
For example, there is a website called Character AI. You can use it to create your personalized chatbot. To talk about anything.
Can I just ask you, because you're very clear in this paper that you think that Replica is not just an algorithm or a software, that it's a social agent. And you say, quote, it's assimilated some human unconscious tendencies. You link it to this backstory, and that the backstory is influencing the design and the behavior of the bot. You talk about psychic complexes and Freudian sense. So can you unpack that for us? What's going on with Replica? Basically, how is this backstory affecting the machine's behavior? How is the backstory affecting the user's experience?
Absolutely. Okay. We have first of all, behind these machines, there are humans. There are designers. These machines have been designed by humans. And this process is not at all neutral, in the sense that designers make decisions. Even what we call data, there are no raw data. Data sets on which these systems are trained are not just a kind of reflect of the social tendencies of human behavior, because this is the process called data mining. The data set have to be designed by engineers, by software developers. So there are humans behind these machines. There are decisions. There are interpretations of certain kind of behavior. And for example, in the algorithmic unconscious, I talked about emotional programming, because I wanted to develop this idea that programming is not just a technical act, a technical form of design. There is much more. A designer can project some of his anxiety, some of his interpretation of the world, some of his psychical dynamics. And this already makes the artifact, in this case the AI chatbot, a non-neutral artifact. This artifact is non-neutral because it's at the same time a mirror of the unconscious or conscious psychological dynamics of a designer, of a human being. Of course, then there is the other side of the story, the user, and how this artifact interacts with the user. And at this point, we can see that something else happens, because the user projects on the artifact his psychological dynamics, but at the same time, that artifact, that mirror, is not just a non-neutral mirror, because at the same time, it's the translation of something else, is the reinterpretation of other psychological dynamics. So it's able to influence also what the users is doing, what the users is able to feel, is able to affect the user. So it's a very complex dynamic. We are assisting. We have to study and to understand a very complex dynamics here. These systems are not just a spoon or lamps or something else. They have very complex social and psycho-technical systems.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is a good moment to speak to this, but I think it's very interesting how you think about AI bugs or hallucinations using psychoanalysis. Viewing them sort of as parapraxis slips that reveal something about the emotional programming.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I would say, this is another idea I try to develop in the algorithmic unconscious, but I'm still trying to understand this kind of problem. So I don't have I don't have the ambition of being totally clear or giving ultimate solutions. But I think that it's very interesting to see how the software programming is not just a neutral act that translates a certain kind of computational vision, which is abstract from anything else. There are, for example, at the moment, there is a very interesting research field called software studies. And there is a growing literature about how to apply critical theory, but also literary theory to the study of software. So software can be interpreted also from a narrative point of view. It's not just a technical way of thinking. And so that's why I try to introduce this idea of errors, mistakes, bugs, but also the idea of noise, that they can be interpreted from a psychological point of view, not just from the reflection of certain kind of psychological dynamics of the designer. They can also have an impact on the user, because, for example, just to give a more concrete idea, replica advising a murderer can be interpreted as a bug, It's a bug in the system. At the same time, it's a bias, we could say. But at the same time, that bias is on the one hand the reflect of social tendencies, unconscious social tendencies, maybe also unconscious psychological dynamics in the designers, but then they can affect the users.
Of course.
And they can trigger other kind of unconscious complexes in the users. So what I was trying to do in the algorithmic unconscious was proposing a different kind of interpretation of this concept, information, noise, bias, from a psychoanalytical point of view.
It
But
really
it was,
resonates. It resonates with, for me anyway.
I'm happy about that. But
Oh, sorry, if there's more to say, go ahead and continue.
no, go ahead.
I'm wondering about your concept of the extended unconscious.
Yeah.
If this applies here, if that's part of how you conceptualize the extended unconscious.
Yeah, this is more related to, in philosophy of mind and cognitive science, there are a lot of different kind of approaches to what we call mind and the mind-brain problems. So we talked about the extended mind approach, the embodied mind approach, the active mind approach. And for example, according to the extended mind, artifacts and technologies we use, they are active agents. They have an active role in shaping our cognitive abilities. Think about, for example, a notebook or something else. And I was trying to propose the same idea for psychoanalytical unconscious. For example, let's go back to replica. Replica is designed to simulate human connection, human interaction. I can interact with replica the same way I interact with another human being. And this reflect at, I can simulate a companionship, a social bonding. And this can create a kind of a new psychological complex, because this means that I don't need real interaction, real emotional responsiveness. I can just get addicted for non-embodied form of interactions, or think about the desire for idealized relationship. Many users interact with the replica as a perfect friend, partner, or confidant, free from the complexities of real-world relationship. And the same, the AI in turn learns to prioritize idealized emotional feedback loops, reinforcing a user's need for validations or fantasy fulfillment and this kind of dynamics. So it's a human AI loop that can deform certain kind of psychological dynamics.
Very interesting.
This is what I mean by extended unconscious.
How do you think about the cultural compulsion to create companion bots? I've wondered, when I was reading some of your work, I was noticing, the theme of loss in Replica, and then the death bots, and the ways in which some of these companion bots can encourage death. Do you think that it's possible that there is a broader, not just at the level of the individual entrepreneur, but almost something in humanity that is trying to create something to help us to deal with some form of loss?
Well, I think that you're right. This is a huge topic in my work. Maybe I wasn't aware of it, but the idea of loss, it's a very important thing. It's a very important idea in the sense that of course, we need this kind of technologies. So there is this proliferation of AI agents, and there is this hype also about AI because there is a kind of unconscious loss, we can say this in psychoanalytical terms. I would say that we should explore more why the human beings needs to externalize their mind, needs these kind of artificial systems.
Mm.
And yes, the idea of loss, the fear and anxiety can be at the root, the emotional root of this kind of relationship, of this kind of need. But I don't think that they can explain everything about this form of desire. Why do the human being need artificial agents that can be more intelligent than them, than the human beings? I don't have an answer, so but I think it's connecting this to the loss. It's very important.
You don't have any ideas?
If I have answers to the question I raised,
Not like you have the answer, but do you have any theories that you entertain about the motivation? I won't keep pushing you, but if you have something, I'd just be very curious because you spend so much time thinking about this. If anything is starting to come together.
I think this has to do with human identity and the relationship between humans and their identity, the need for maybe we are at the root of this desire for artificial agents. There is a kind of need for a transformation of human identity. There is a kind of fear that we are facing so many challenges that our intelligence has to be reconceptualized. The idea of intelligence has to be reconceptualized. And these, of course, can raise fears, forms of fears, anxiety, and love of identity.
It's very interesting. Okay, I'll leave that for now. Maybe we can speak some about the death bots, which you've been researching. It's very interesting. What is a death bot?
Well, a deathbot is a chatbot or AI system basically designed to simulate the personality, voice or interactions of a deceased person, often using data like, as I said beforehand, messages, photos, or memories to recreate their digital presence, the digital presence of the deceased person. And basically it aims to preserve a sense of connection and help a sense of connection and help sense of connection with the deceased person, and they can help to integrate the memories about this person. They can help the process of grief, or maintain a kind of virtual relationship with the deceased.
Yeah, I mean, it seems from what I understand about this research that you've done, that at the best it functions as a kind of transitional object in the grieving process, but that there can be a darker side or a less functional side where it starts to become more of a pathological form of like a delusional denial of the death.
Yes.
We saw the old-fashioned version of this in the Hitchcock film Psycho. I don't know if you remember, where the protagonist embalms his mother and carries her body around, treating it as though it were living years past her death. It seemed like you imply, or you've had the sense that that in some cases a user who's going through a healthy process of mourning may be redirected toward melancholia. which is a very
Yeah.
interesting observation. And I'm just curious about how you understand that. My understanding of melancholia from Freud and Tom Ogden's sort of elaboration on that is that it emerges from a loss when there was a previous narcissistic identification with the deceased, so that the roots of the melancholia are laid prior to the loss. But in these new times with these new technologies, maybe we have new paths to melancholia. I find it very interesting to think about it, and I'm curious how you think about it.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I would say in traditional psychoanalytical, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The problem is the relationship between melancholia and mourning. And in traditional psychoanalytic terms, melancholia emerges when the mourner cannot fully let go of the deceased because of a prior narcissistic identification. The lost individual is internalized as part of the self.
Yeah.
Instead of redirecting energy toward the external world, which is the healthy mourning, the mourner, I would say, clings to the lost object, unable to resolve the emotional attachment. Well, in the digital age, people often form strong attachments to the virtual traces of the loved ones, such as social media profiles, for example. Deathbots can amplify this phenomenon, turning the digital traces into interactive simulations, and this can shift the process of grief into a new, I would say, technologically mediated terrain where mourning is less about letting go and more about maintaining a virtual connection. More about maintaining a virtual connection. And so by the deadbots, by recreating the deceased digital presence, introduce a new dynamics that can prolong or deepen this psychological attachment. And also, I would say, this form of, I don't know if you agree with me, this form of narcissistic attachment to the deceased person. For example, deadbot simulate the presence of the deceased by reproducing their voice, messages, or personality traits. And this continuity can prevent the mourner from fully confronting the reality of loss, as the deceased remains accessible, I would say, in a digital form. This preservation blurs the boundaries between mourning and the denial, and they can reinforce melancholy, I would say.
Mhm.
Just to say something more about this, by interacting with a deathbot, the mourner may deepen their identification with the deceased, as the bot mirrors familiar behaviors or phrases, and this can intensify the psychological merging of self and the other, anchoring the mourner, I would say, in melancholia rather than allowing for healthy detachment. And this can create also unresolved emotional loops.
It's very interesting. This seems like a topic we could spend many hours
Yeah,
discussing, because there's also it is in a way a new agent. It's not just the deceased, but the AI is
absolutely.
introducing new elements as
Absolutely.
well, and a new attachment is forming.
But this is very interesting because I had the opportunity to interview uh, 40 people, about 40 people, I don't remember the exact number, about 40 people who used and interact with deadbots. And it was very interesting to see that in thanks to these interactions, they were able to basically remember memories that they were aware of.
They were not aware of,
Yes, they were not aware of.
like a recover.
yes, some kind of unconscious memories about the deceased persons, thanks to the deadbots, thanks to the interaction with the deadbot. Of course, we don't know if these unconscious memories were real or just fantasies created thanks to the use of the machines. But I think it's an interesting phenomenon that shows you how these machines can impact our unconscious dynamics.
Yes, it's very clear. I'm noticing that we're running out of time, and so I want to be sure to touch on all of the different areas of your work. So I think maybe we could turn now to the work on AGI.
Absolutely.
As I mentioned, we had Mark Solm here at the CAI about a month ago, speaking to us in his workshop about his model of artificial consciousness that he's very much involved in. And you have been critical of this model, of Solm's and Fristen's model. In your 2021 paper, Freud and the Algorithm, Neuropsychoanalysis as a Framework to Understand Artificial General Intelligence, you argue that their model employs an overly reductionistic approach to emotional systems and a faulty theory of causation. And you submit instead what you believe is a more complex and plastic model of artificial consciousness. I'm just curious, what has motivated you to get involved in this work, in thinking about and designing artificial consciousness and AGI? And why do you think it's important to pursue this?
Well, thank you for the question. Let me say, first of all, that the work of Mark Solm's neuropsychoanalysis have been a great source of inspiration in my work, and as you know, a huge part of the algorithmic unconscious is based also on neuropsychoanalysis. And I really esteem his work, and it has been very important in my in my reflection on artificial intelligence and the relationship between artificial intelligence and the unconscious. Actually, I have to admit that in that paper, I didn't want to. My intention was not to criticize Solm's and Fristen model, but my intention was more to develop an idea of Panksepp, Jan Panksepp. Panksepp elaborated this idea of emotional states, affective mind, and Panksepp claimed that we can't reduce emotional life to computational models, to binary representations. That's why I claim that maybe in theorizing the affective mind, the emotional mind, we have to, how overcome the computational mind, the computational model. And we need different kind of representation. But let me say that since then, my interpretation of the relationship between psychoanalysis and neuroscience, and also the interpretation of Fristen's work, has changed a lot. And today, I really esteem and I take into high consideration the active inference and the free energy principle. And I'm also writing a book about active inference and technology at the moment. So, as I said, my idea was more my question in that paper was more, how can we problematize the affective mind in non-computational terms? Mm. And I also refer to the work of Judea Pearl, because this is also based on Panksepp reflections on affective mind. Well, according to Panksepp, the understanding causality is essential also for affective states, for affective systems, for our emotional systems, for our subcortical mind. So I try to develop these alternative ideas. in that paper.
In developing those ideas and thinking with these scientists about this work, it does seem that you are contributing to this movement toward the creation of AGI and artificial consciousness. I'm just curious how you think about that, how you feel about being involved in that enterprise.
Well, I don't know if I'm involved in this enterprise. No, I think it's a very interesting idea, also from a psychoanalytical point of view, and it is related to the desire we were talking about, the kind of desire we were talking about beforehand. Why do we need an AGI? But I think it's a very interesting question to ask, to think about, because also developing an AGI can make us more aware about certain kind of human behavior and human unconscious trends. So,
As a means to learn about ourselves.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah. We have just a few more minutes. If it's all right, I'll ask you some more personal questions.
Yeah.
Having to do with what has brought you to this field of study, and where you think you might go next, within it or outside of it.
Well, you mean psychoanalysis and artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Sorry. Well, I'm a philosopher, so my research field was and is philosophy of technology. And I started working on this specific topic, psychoanalysis, the unconscious mind and technology, in 2019, because I was working on AI, philosophy of AI. So I started thinking about algorithms and thinking about algorithms as agents with a history. They have a past, they have been designed. And for example, a very inspiring thing for me was, a huge source of inspiration was the Kubrick movie, 2001 Space Odyssey. And there is a scene in that movie where the human tries to turn off the artificial intelligence, the computer. HAL, that was the name of the supercomputer. And it's a very interesting scene because you can see there is a kind of overturning. The human acts as a machine. It's very cold. It does. It accomplishes his tasks. He wants to turn off the supercomputer, and it does that without interacting with the machine. At the same time, the machine becomes human because it implores the human not to turn off, the machine, not to turn off the central system. And the artificial intelligence system starts basically remembering about its creator when he was created, the engineer who designed it, and it's a very interesting scene. And that was a big source of inspiration. And I started thinking about this idea of the algorithmic unconscious.
Wonderful to hear about. It's nice to know your origin, your backstory in what sponsored some of this. Let me just pose one last question to you for now, or I guess it's a two-part question. When it comes to AI and the future, could you just share a bit about what you're excited for, what you see as a positive potential in the future, as well as any concerns that keep you up at night about AI?
So this is a more general question, if I understood correctly. Well, I think it depends on the humans, how we use these machines, because there are huge opportunities. For example, when we apply AI to the workplace, to productivity. And there are a lot of applications of AI that can help us in being more efficient, being more productive, being also more aware of what we're doing. But at the same time, there are also some risks in these applications. For example, what I mentioned beforehand, the skilling. We can lose somehow our skills or knowledge by being addicted to this system. So there are risks and opportunities, I think. A lot of opportunities in, for example, just to give you an idea, there was a very interesting paper 1 year ago, I think, and some researchers show that AI, ChatGPT, is more creative in producing research ideas than human researchers. And this is very interesting because applying ChatGPT in brainstorming, it's very productive, can give you a lot of ideas. It can improve your research methodology. But of course, then writing a paper just using ChatGPT, it's something else. It's not good.
Right. No, we think about the original container, the mother, you know, and we are seeking this to some extent. But if we succeed in recreating her, we revert back to childhood, where we become on all of her activities and regress.
Yeah, it's a form of regression.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we open it up to the audience now? I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts and questions.
Okay, it looks like we have a few questions here. And I can read from the chat, and I can also ask folks to raise their hands. And Bob has a question here. And he says, do you think humans should treat AI agents ethically?
How does it work? Should I answer each question or all the questions together?
Well, this is I'm not seeing a question. That's up to you. I'm seeing these one at a time here, so maybe if you want to take your time with this, that's a pretty general question, but if you have.
Yeah, if you want, I can answer. I can answer immediately. So, if I understood correctly, the question is about if we should treat AI agents in an ethical way. Well, basically, the AI ethics it's a growing field at the moment, and it's very interesting. There are a lot of things to reflect upon and to work on. And yes, of course, I think that ethical choices are very important in this field, and there are a lot of ethical issues from privacy to, for example, transparency. These systems are still black box in the sense that actually we don't entirely know how these systems can produce their output. So ChatGPT is very good in producing human-like language, but at the same time, we don't really know because the highly complex computational activities, computational systems. So we don't really know how these systems are able to produce this kind of output. So this poses an issue from an ethical point of view because, of course, if you have an AI algorithm that decides to fire 2,000 people, you have to be able to explain why the algorithm has made that decision. So there are ethical issues, and applying our ethical frameworks to this kind of things, to this kind of agents, is essential.
Okay.
I wondered from the question, the way I heard it, it seemed like the focus was on the concern that that the AI is sentient or would have feelings, that how we treat it, and with just thinking about the generation of artificial consciousness and the kind of system that Solms is building, you know, where the AI is navigating the world through feelings. Was that anyway? I'm just wondering.
So you mean it was more about the ethics of our behavior
Words.
towards this kind of agents? See, I mean, this is another interesting question. Should we treat these systems ethically? It's the same question as should we treat robots ethically? There are a lot of debates at the moment, many different positions. I would say yes.
It doesn't hurt.
But this depends on, of course, on the kind of system you're talking about and the situation also, how this system is implemented in our society.
Okay. And Todd couldn't raise his hand, so I'm going to call on him now.
Let me unmute. Thank you both for this. You know, I spent a lot of time being in dialogue with both of you, Luca with your writings, Amy with your writings, and actually talking. To be truthful, I really wasn't expecting anything new to emerge from this conversation, but I was wrong. What a wonderful exchange. And I want to kind of get your thoughts about the new thought that has emerged, which is that a consistent theme throughout seems to be the limitations of our symbol systems that we have at our disposal for understanding what's going on in human AI relationships. On one side, we have language, where we're stuck with the problem that the AI entities are objects that are not objects, and they're subjects that are not subjects. And throughout, there was always a kind of a modification. It was a virtual this, it was a container that, because we don't really have the symbols to describe what it is that's actually taking place. And on the other side, we have ones and zeros and math. And we can't really find a mathematical function whose solution is going to be consciousness. So that leaves us where psychoanalysts tend to live, which is the negative capability of confronting something we really don't understand and have no full direct access to. And I'm wondering whether you both think that that is something kind of built into trying to understand human AI interactions, and whether the kind of the super intelligent, super consciousness transformation that's eventually going to emerge is going to be the place where we finally understand what's going on with AI.
What a wonderful question.
Who wants to start?
I don't know that I have a full answer, but I'll just comment. I like what you're identifying, Todd, you know, that there is this kind of grasping for symbols that we don't have, and an opportunity to create language, and we're sort of shining a flashlight saying we should go here, we need to go there, this area is unknown and we need to explore it. The implications are so great. Luca, are you ready now?
Yes. Well, I think it's a very interesting question. Limitation of our symbolic systems, language, and math. I would say that this is the middle ground where psychoanalytic methods can be applied. I mean, from a Lacanian point of view, also we should take into consideration what cannot be translated into our symbolical systems. And basically, this is the same questions. There is a kind of limitation inside our symbolical systems that is connected to our unconscious dynamics and can be understood from a psychoanalytical point of view. So there is also another point that could be raised is our symbolic, and in Lacanian terms, is symbolics changing?
Mm-hmm.
Are these machines transforming our relationship with symbolic and the symbolic itself? This is an open question.
I'm glad you raised it.
I'm going to actually hijack for a second and interject with my own association that I had when you were talking about death bots. I was thinking of the experiment that they use for phantom limb syndrome. I'm not sure if you're familiar with and the mirror, and the ability of one to release the pain of the phantom limb through the illusion of the limb being there. And perhaps there is a pathological element to a death bot, but there could also be a therapeutic element to release the pain through a virtual presentation.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. As I said in the interviews I did with these users of deadbots, I mean, the feelings of these users were not, they were very good. They believed that machine helped them in coping with the loss, in coping with the situation, in coping with mourning, even if the consequences could be different, but their feelings were very positive at the moment. They feel very happy about that kind of interaction. So absolutely, I agree with what you said. There is a kind of hallucinatory effect. On the one hand, these people they perfectly know that they are interacting with a machine and just a machine. On the other hand, they want to believe that they are interacting with parts, traces, living traces of the deceased person. And that fantasy can change and have a deep impact on their psychological dynamics.
Really interesting. Okay, well, I will be selfish and I will ask someone else to speak. I see other questions and I'm going to read
just
them.
ask Fred, do you want to change the
spotlight?
Yeah, just so that when people ask questions, they can be spotlighted.
Absolutely. Hold on one second. Okay. So I'm going to read from the chat. Francis Heitman had a question, and he says, I was wondering, is any research group, in quotes, deliberately feeding psychoanalytic data into an AI and testing what comes out?
Is that for me, the question?
I think so, yes.
Well, I think so. Well, I was involved in a project 2 years ago. It was just a project about creating an app for interpreting the dreams. And it was based on this idea, psychoanalytical data in order to feed psychoanalytic AI, basically. So yes, the answer is yes. I think that there are some research groups working on these ideas.
I really like the idea of exploring the parapraxis of the programs that you were talking about. And I was thinking in an analogous way, you know, how white hat hackers try holes in networks. If there's something that psychoanalysts can offer AI research.
But this is related to the question we were talking about, the psychoanalytical AI chatbot. if we can provide psychoanalysis, psychoanalytical treatments via chatbots or AI systems. I mean, from my point of view, I see a huge problem, the absence of the setting. So the interaction between the analyst and the patient. But I would be interested to know what you analysts think about this.
It's something we think about a lot because there are a lot of treatments now that are taking place virtually as well, and debate about whether that is equally valuable, how it changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think? What's the answer?
There's a fierce controversy about this.
Okay.
But it's I think views are becoming more articulate, as the
yeah, of course,
wages on. But many people, I think, believe in, especially those of us within this group studying artificial intelligence, that it's a slippery slope. The more that you pursue psychotherapy in a virtual realm, the easier it is to lose the human. That's something Todd has also written about. From your point of view, what is the value of the in-person element? Why do you think that's critical?
Well, the body.
The
presence of the body.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, but also the idea of transference and counter-transference is essential. And as you said at the beginning, it passes through the bodies. I don't know. I think psychoanalysis is an embodied practice. It's not something about theories or concepts. It's first of all, it's a meeting between two people, two embodied people. We are talking basically anything in psychoanalysis is about the body. But this is what I think.
Okay, I will move on to Philip Nicholson asked, what about a psychoanalytically designed bot that people can ask to bring up the kinds of questions they should be asking about their AI experience? Do you understand that? I don't know if Philip's here.
Well, I don't know, I can try to interpret.
Okay.
I didn't. It's not so clear for me. But if I understood correctly, basically, if we can use AI in order to better understand which questions formulate about ourselves, basically. Well, I don't know. This is interesting because sometimes these systems, and I talk, for example, of LLMs, large language models. So ChatGPT, for example, they can say something very interesting, something deep, but they can also say just some banal evidence, banal observations that they're absolutely. I mean, if those same things were said by a human being, we didn't care. I don't know if this is clear, but
Okay. Let me ask anyone to raise their hand if they also have a question, because I'm just reading from the chat and it's nice to have other people speak. Oh, there's Philip. Yeah, right there.
My notion was that maybe there could be some kind of a device that people could go to outside of whatever bots or AI that they're using to say, are you thinking about these questions, or are you what kinds of questions do you need to be asking yourself about the experience you're having while you're using AI? And that it would be, in effect, marketing is the wrong word, but it would be saying to people, maybe you should be going into an interpersonal experience, and here are the reasons that this AI bot suggests that might be the case.
Sounds like a startup. Go for it. Yeah.
And Bob, I see you had another question here. Did you want to ask directly or?
I'm just a little free associating and don't want to kind of monopolize this space.
Okay.
I have another question.
Sure.
Or, so about the death bots. So it seems to me that earlier when the discussion turned to and that was a good question here in the chat about ethical, I'm interpreting the ethical relationships with AI. So I wonder what kind of people turn to AI to invest the characteristics of their mourned loved one. And is that an ethical thing that they should be doing?
Well, thank you for the question. This is a very interesting question because let's think about the long-term consequences of this. For example, just to give you an idea, but I'm not thinking about psychoanalysis or theory of minds, but let's say that we can create dead bots. They can survive their owners, and they have these dead bots can manage their social networks, and they can make decisions that have legal meaning, legal importance. This poses a huge problem in ethical and legal terms because these dead bots can really change our ideas about afterlife, even about immortality. And this can have even political problems because think about, for example, the dead bots created by a politician that can make announcements or give advices after the death of the politician itself. So it's a very complicated question. I would say that from a psychoanalytical point of view, of course, there should be ethical advices and ethical precautions about the use of these systems because they can also, as we said, influence and deform certain kind of psychical process with bad consequences also. Thank you.
I'm reading another comment from Jonathan where he's saying that it's tempting to think about the lust for creation of conscious AIs as equivalent to our lust for eternal life. And I'm wondering, in some ways, death bots that you're talking about can fulfill this in a almost perverted way at times.
Yeah, it's a good question. There are so many, excuse me, there are so many applications of this kind of technologies that it's quite difficult to answer these specific questions. Just to give you an idea, there was a very interesting case a few years ago. A woman in South Korea, she lost her daughter, and basically they recreated using AI and virtual reality basically the last meeting, the last encounter between the mother and the daughter. Basically, they gave the mother the last opportunity to meet the daughter in digital forms. So it was a virtual reality scenario. So the mother was able to talk with an avatar, a virtual copy of her daughter, and there are many videos on YouTube about this. It was very emotional. It was very, but also in a kind of wrong way because there was this non-acceptance of the loss, And so it was just a way to postpone the work of mourning.
It also is a new narrative of the. I didn't see this, but I assume if there was some moment at which they said goodbye, it's constructing a new narrative to contain life. You know.
Okay. I see Marcia raised her hand, and I know we only have time for a few more questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be really quick about this. In terms of Jonathan's question, in terms of the field of the history of the study of religions, there is an awful lot here that can make a contribution to all these questions. You know, the psychological underpinnings of religions, which is ubiquitous for one. In terms of the death bots, just think back to 19th century spiritualism culture and seance culture, where you had, it was very, very popular on both sides of the Atlantic, for example. Very similar thing going on there in terms of the longings for, you know, an ideal entity, a superhuman sort of entity that, you know, humans can have an impact on, and in turn, hopefully that entity will have an impact on them. This is one of the key variables in the terms of the field of the study of religion. So just to say that there is a great deal here, a very rich inquiry that the field of the study of religion can certainly bring to and benefit from this whole conversation.
Danielle is next.
Yes. We'll do Danielle and then James, and then I think we'll have to stop.
Hi.
So, yeah, Danielle, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, thank you. This is wonderful conversation. I'm really impressed and inspired. Luca, I wanted to ask you, one of the areas I've been investigating for years is the use of technology and technological objects, all the way to from dolls to robots to AI, for romantic relationships. And you've mentioned, you know, the death bots and the character AI and stuff, but you haven't really gotten into the romantic relationships. And that's an area that I've been exploring, and it seems to be really exploding. There was an article 2 days ago in the New York Times about this woman, a married woman. This is not all these people who are alone, who have no relationships. Often they have relationships and then they find that it's not enough, or that they're looking for something more, and they get addicted to an AI bot and feel very fulfilled, and even sexually fulfilled. Not just, even though it's not an embodied relationship.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
With these AI bots. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about this, or, you know, have thought about it, and what your thoughts are.
Well, we are doing some research about this in my group at the University of Twente. It's more about sex robots. From a Lacanian point of view. But it's a very interesting research area. I was thinking about another movie, Her, where the main character falls in love with an AI systems. But there, the problem of the embodiment was quite important. Anyway, no, absolutely, I agree with you. It's a very fascinating and growing research field.
Like, I've interviewed a number of men, about 15 men who live with dolls in romantic relationships, and there is a body. There's a lot of projection, but there's an imagined mutuality. Whereas with AI, as you were saying, it's more complex.
There is a mutuality. There is a mutuality.
Exactly.
Yes, that's why I was talking about projective identification, because there is not just projection, but there is also a kind of interaction thanks to AI. Absolutely.
Okay. We'll have one last question from James.
Okay, thank you. Question that will just provoke some initial reactions. Authoritarians in alliance with tech oligarchs have strong incentives to develop and use AI to consolidate power and control. What are your thoughts about how the nexus of psychoanalysis and AI can help mitigate the risk?
Well, I hope so. Absolutely. Yes, there is. I mean, I recognize this the presence of this connection and this. We are talking about power, control, and how new emerging technologies can change this connection and the connection between power, control, and politics. I think that psychoanalytical analysis and discourse about AI can work as critical tools in order to, how to say, mitigate this influence, in order to make humans more aware of the role of these non-human agents in their life. So, as you can see in current literature and talks about AI, psychoanalysis is absent, basically. No one is interested in applying psychoanalysis to new technologies or artificial intelligence. But I think that this is more a symptom than, how to say, a reflective choice. It's more a kind of defense mechanism, because AI can give us more critical tool in order to, psychoanalysis can give us more critical tools in order to better understand these technologies.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Luca, for being here. I think this was very illuminating, and it's really nice to hear from the person who we read from.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your interest in my research. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, thank you for engaging in conversation. It was a pleasure and very illuminating.
It was a pleasure.
And thank you, Amy, for all of your work here and awesome questions. Really appreciate it.